Hello, this is Gary Scudder, professor in the Corps, ably assisted by the excellent Eric Schonstrom, who's playing William One-Shot Bodine today. Today I just want to talk about something that I use in Core 120. This is a website. I mean, I've used it in other classes as well, but I think it really fits in 120 very nicely. It's a website called the Failed State Index. Which I think now they've literally this year for the first time in 2014, they're now calling the Fragile State Index. I think maybe they thought that sounded a little more pleasant and not nearly as harsh. But they've been doing this for about 10 years. It's a group called the Fund for Peace. And I mean, I suppose they're more leftward leaning, but it's hard to say. What they essentially do is they take a look at a lot of different factors and determine how fragile a state is, essentially how close it is to collapse. So again, they used to call it the Failed State Index. So if you just did a Google search for Failed State Index or Fragile State Index, it would pop up. And there's one usually every year in the fall it comes out. And it's very interesting. I've used it for a long time. And what they do is if you go to the website, they have like 12 different categories and you get a score for it from 1 to 10. So I guess the perfect score, that is perfect as in total disaster, would be 120. And normally the winner, which is something you don't really want to win, normally has about 112 or 113. So literally they're getting like Olympic judging. They're getting like 9s or 9.5 or even a 10 across the board. And this is not something that you want to finish first in. I mean, normally year after year after year, Somalia dominates this. I think though this last year in 2014, for the first time, I think that Central African Republic unseated Somalia. And then if you go all the way to the other end, at 178 countries later, it's usually one of the Scandinavian countries. Like literally, it's like right at the end are always the 4 Scandinavian countries. And I think Finland is which finished last this time, or I guess finished first, depending upon your perspective. So if you go down to the categories, they tend to have categories like mounting demographic pressures, massive movement of refugees, vengeance-seeking group grievances, chronic and sustained human flight, uneven economic development, poverty, sharp and severe economic decline, legitimacy of the state, a progressive decline of public services, violation of human rights, security apparatus, that is it secure enough to look after the state, but the other side of it is it also repressive as hell, rise of factionalized elites, and intervention of external actors. Now, my beloved Yemen is 8th. They always seem to come in 8th every time. So there's always like inevitably 6 African countries, then Afghanistan, and then Yemen. So Yemen always slots in at number 8. What I think is valuable about it is it's one of those websites you can open up easily in class. It's easy for the students to use. And then you start going down by categories and talking about what it means. And there are also on the website also some other reports that give you more detail. If you click on Yemen, they'll tell you their progression over the years and also related reports about Yemen, about why they came up with these numbers. Why I think it's really good is it gives the students a very strategic way to think about states. And yes, you can always also use it as a way to spin, are these Europeans, even though the head of this, I guess, is Australian, is this a very European or Western way to determine success and failure, and hence is it very unfair? So I think you can also spin it that way. What I think that makes it very good for 120 is you have to come up with a good, just, and sustainable society. So this really gives them a very specific tool to use when thinking about it. So I think at the beginning of the semester, say the second week, you open the website up and you sort of look at the countries which top the list for most fragile states that are most likely to fail. And then you go down to the bottom and look at those. And for that matter, you compare it to the U.S., which is never as good on this as you would expect it to be. And then when you do that, then you can also use the subcategories for means to do other research. Now, I don't have a 120 this semester because I'm dealing with other issues, but I think next time I teach 120, I'm going to make this an even bigger part of the process. What I think I'm going to do is, instead of waiting until the 14th week to have every group present their good, just, and sustainable society, I'm going to push it up to about 2/3 of the way through. Because I really want the students to present it and then have to adapt it. And one way I think I'm going to do this is, and this is something I tend to do, is whenever a group presents its good, just, and sustainable societies, I always have the other groups in the class respond to them and give commentary and say, this is what we think is the problem. They get to ask 2 big questions which lead to some kind of response, some kind of reaction to the main group. And then the other group has to come back the next day and respond. But I think I'm going to expand this because it always works out very well. And I think I'm going to have the other groups respond as if they were the failed state index folks. So they would look at the other groups and then judge them using the same categories and saying, this is where I think, and this is going to be a very systematic way. Is it flawed? Yes. But I think what's good for the students is it forces them to think about a bunch of different things. It's, if you've taught 120, the students are mainly interested in industries based on hemp production and all sorts of things because, they're in Vermont. But if you essentially set it up where you really make them think about real strong, defined categories, I think it's going to very much make it much more grounded. So anyway, this is what I do in 120. It's a website I've used a lot of times in the 3rd year classes, but I think it really fits in well to 120. It's just ready-made for opening up in class. It has good graphics, easy to maneuver around. It'd be one of those things that would be a really good day if you wanted to ask the students to bring in technology and give them specific assignments and steer them to the website. I think there's some really cool stuff you can do. So anyway, that's what I do for 120. If you have any questions, as always, drop me a line. I'd love to talk to you. And I think on the website for the core talks, I'll put the link to the website. Cool? Thank you very much.